By day, Zoe Harper is a dedicated trauma nurse racing through the rainy streets of Boston on her motorcycle, exhausted after long hospital shifts but driven by a deep commitment to saving lives. In the darkness of a stormy night, fate brings her to a wrecked luxury car with a mysterious, unconscious man trapped inside, seconds away from a fiery explosion that will change both their destinies forever. What begins as a heroic roadside rescue evolves into an unexpected connection that bridges two vastly different worlds. Hers of practical healing and his of corporate power, challenging everything they thought they knew about themselves. As powerful forces conspire against them and dangerous secrets emerge from the shadows, Zoe and the man she saved must confront the ultimate question. Was their life-changing collision merely an accident, or was it always meant to be? Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free, and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The Storm That Changed Everything. Rain lashed against Zoe's visor as she leaned into the curve of the deserted highway. Her motorcycle's headlight carved a narrow path through the darkness, the pre-dawn world empty except for her. 3 consecutive night shifts at Boston Memorial had left her muscles aching and her mind foggy with exhaustion, but the familiar thrill of the ride kept her focused as she navigated the slick asphalt. Something about the danger of the road in these conditions always made her feel more alive than the sterile hospital corridors ever could. She'd chosen the longer route home, the winding coastal highway rather than the interstate, telling herself it was to clear her head. In truth, she craved these moments of solitude, the roar of her engine drowning out the chaos of the trauma center where she'd spent the last 36 hours battling against death. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. Tonight had been a loss, a teenager who'd never wake up from a senseless accident. Zoe had watched the light fade from his eyes, had seen his parents' world collapse in the waiting room afterward. A gust of wind buffeted her bike, bringing her focus sharply back to the road. The rain was falling harder now, thick sheets that reduced visibility to mere yards. She should pull over, wait it out. But home was just 20 minutes away, a hot shower, and her bed were calling. That's when she saw it, headlight beams slicing wildly through the air from the roadside ditch, illuminating the underside of an overturned luxury car. Steam rose from the crumpled hood, mixing with the rain to create an eerie fog around the wreckage. The taillights still flickered weakly, suggesting the crash had happened recently. Without hesitation, Zoe swerved onto the shoulder, her tires skidding slightly as she brought her bike to a stop. Years of trauma nursing instincts took over, pushing away her fatigue in a sudden rush of adrenaline. She sprinted toward the wreck, heart hammering against her ribs, rain pelting her leather jacket and soaking through to her skin within seconds. "Hello? Is anyone in there? Can you hear me?" she called, crouching beside the mangled silver Aston Martin. The vehicle had flipped completely, its roof crushed against the ground, windows shattered. The car must have been traveling at tremendous speed to cause such catastrophic damage. A man hung upside down, suspended by his seatbelt, blood trickling from a deep gash across his forehead. The flickering interior light revealed an unconscious face, handsome despite the circumstances, with strong features and dark hair now matted with blood. His expensive suit, probably worth more than Zoe made in a month, was torn and soaked with both rain and blood. A faint smell of expensive cologne mixed with the more ominous sense of gasoline and burning rubber. When Zoe pressed her fingers to his neck to find a pulse, his eyelids fluttered. Startlingly blue eyes, clear and intense despite the circumstances, fixed on her momentarily before closing again. The pulse beneath her fingers was weak but present, thready but regular enough to give her hope. "I'm Zoe, I'm a nurse. I'm going to get you out of here," she said, with the calm authority that had become second nature after years in the emergency room. She spoke clearly, loudly enough to be heard over the rain, even though she wasn't sure he could still hear her. "Try not to move your neck if you can hear me." A flicker of orange near the engine caught her attention, flames beginning to lick at the undercarriage. The acrid smell of burning oil filled her nostrils, and her pulse quickened. She'd seen enough car accidents in her career to know what came next. "Damn it," she muttered, pulling her pocket knife from her jacket to slice through the seatbelt. "This is going to hurt, but we need to move now. The car could go up any minute. With practiced efficiency, she supported his neck as best she could while maneuvering his unconscious body through the shattered window. The man was heavy, at least 6 feet tall with a solid frame, and Zoe strained under his weight as her boots slipped in the mud. Rain pounded her back as she dragged him inch by a painful inch away from the wreckage. 20 yards. That was all they needed for safety. 20 yards between life and death. She had dragged him halfway when the night exploded into blinding light. The force of the blast knocked them both to the ground, and Zoe instinctively shielded the stranger's body with her own as debris rained down around them. Heat singed her back through her rain-soaked jacket, and for a moment she couldn't breathe through the smoke and superheated air. When she looked up, the car was engulfed in roaring flames that turned raindrops to steam before they could reach the burning metal. The orange glow illuminated the scene like a macabre sunrise, casting long shadows across the wet ground. "That was close," she whispered, turning her attention back to her patient. Her trained eyes scanned his body, cataloging injuries with clinical precision: head laceration with significant bleeding, possible concussion, probable broken ribs evidenced by the awkward rise and fall of his chest. Left arm at an unnatural angle, fractured possibly in multiple places, but his airway remained clear and his pulse, while weak, was steady. He had a fighting chance if help arrived soon. Zoe pulled out her phone, relieved to find it still functional despite the rain, and called 911. She gave precise directions and a clinical assessment of the man's condition, emphasizing the seriousness of his injuries without sounding panicked. Then she settled into wait, her jacket cushioning his head from the wet ground, her fingers monitoring his pulse with professional detachment. "Stay with me," she murmured, checking his pupils with the flashlight on her phone. "The ambulance will be here soon. Just keep breathing." The man's eyes opened again, clearer this time. He stared at her with an intensity that made something flutter in her chest, a sensation unrelated to adrenaline or professional concern. There was something in those blue depths that seemed to recognize her, though she was certain they'd never met before. "Are you real?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames and falling rain. "Or am I already dead?" "Very real," Zoe assured him with a gentle smile. "And so are you, which is something of a miracle considering what's left of your car." She nodded toward the burning wreckage. "You've got a guardian angel looking out for you tonight." He tried to speak again, but pain contorted his features. His hand, surprisingly strong despite his injuries, gripped hers. Zoe squeezed back, offering what comfort she could. "Don't try to talk. Help is coming. I can hear the sirens now. Just focus on breathing nice and slow." "Thank you," he managed before slipping back into unconsciousness, his hand going limp in hers. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. Zoe maintained her vigil, checking vital signs every few minutes, ensuring his airway stayed clear, applying pressure to the worst of the bleeding. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and she found herself studying his face in the flickering light of the fire. The strong jaw, the slight crease between his brows even in unconsciousness, as if he carried his worries even into oblivion. Who was he? What had brought him to this deserted road in the middle of the night? What demons had he been racing away from or toward? The scene erupted into controlled chaos as emergency personnel arrived. Paramedics swarmed around them, and Zoe shifted into professional mode, rattling off vital signs and observations. Female motorcyclists pulled him from the vehicle before it exploded, she heard someone report as paramedics loaded the man onto a stretcher. "Lucky guy." "Blood pressure's dropping," another paramedic called. "We need to move now." As they lifted him into the ambulance, something fell from his pocket, a slim leather wallet. Zoe picked it up, intending to hand it to the paramedics, but they had already closed the doors. The ambulance pulled away, sirens blaring, leaving her standing in the rain, the stranger's wallet in her hand, watching the taillights disappear around the bend. "Ma'am, are you injured?" A police officer approached, notepad in hand. "We'll need a statement." Zoe shook her head, suddenly aware of the ache in her shoulders, the stinging of small cuts on her hands, the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her now that the adrenaline was fading. "I'm fine. Just tired." She answered their questions mechanically, explained how she'd come upon the accident, described pulling the man from the car moments before it exploded. She mentioned nothing about those piercing blue eyes or the strange connection she'd felt. That seemed private somehow, a secret between her and the stranger whose name she still didn't know. Later, after refusing a ride home from the officers, she straddled her motorcycle once more. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind a world washed clean, stars peeking through breaks in the clouds. She slipped the wallet into her jacket pocket. She would return it later, she told herself. Right now, she just wanted to go home. What she didn't know was that picking up that wallet would change her life forever. The man she had saved wasn't just any accident victim, and fate had more in store for both of them than either could imagine. Chapter 2. Crossing Paths. 3 days after the accident, Zoe found the stranger's wallet still sitting on her kitchen counter, where she'd tossed it upon arriving home that night. She hadn't opened it yet, respecting his privacy, but she'd called the hospital twice to check on his condition. Critical but stable, they'd told her. No visitors except immediate family. She picked up the wallet now, running her fingers over the soft leather. Curiosity finally won out over propriety. Inside was a Massachusetts driver's license for Alexander Reed, with an address in Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most exclusive neighborhoods. The photograph didn't do him justice, she thought, then chided herself for the observation. Several platinum credit cards and a business card reading, simply Alexander Reed, CEO Reed Innovations, completed the picture. Reed Innovations, she murmured, the name tugging at her memory. Curious, she opened her laptop and typed the name into the search engine. The results were immediate and impressive. Reed Innovations was a multi-billion-dollar technology company specializing in medical devices and cutting-edge healthcare solutions. The name suddenly seemed familiar. Their new surgical robot had been installed at her hospital just months ago. A marvel of engineering that was revolutionizing certain procedures. Alexander Reed himself appeared in numerous articles and photographs, receiving awards, speaking at conferences, standing confidently in impeccably tailored suits. In every image, there was something in his eyes that reminded her of that moment on the rain-soaked highway, an intensity, a focus that seemed to look straight through superficial layers to something deeper. "So my mystery man is a tech billionaire," she said to her empty apartment. "Of course he is." She laughed at the absurdity of it all. A week ago, she wouldn't have been able to pick Alexander Reed out of a lineup. Now she'd saved his life and was sitting in her shabby apartment looking at his wallet. Life had a strange way of throwing people together. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Frowning, she wasn't expecting anyone. Zoe closed the laptop and went to answer it. A tall man in an impeccable suit stood in the hallway of her modest apartment building, looking decidedly out of place among the scuffed walls and worn carpet. "Ms. Zoe Harper?" he asked, his voice polite but formal. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "I'm James Donovan, personal assistant to Alexander Reed." He offered a business card identical to the one in the wallet. "Mr. Reed would like to thank you personally for saving his life." Zoe blinked, momentarily speechless. "How did you find me?" A small smile softened James's formal demeanor. "The police report had your name. Finding your address wasn't difficult for someone with Mr. Reed's resources." "Of course," Zoe said, not entirely comfortable with how easily her privacy had been breached. "How is he?" "Recovering well, thank you. He was released from the hospital yesterday and is resting at home. He asked me to extend an invitation for you to visit him tomorrow afternoon, if that would be convenient." Zoe hesitated, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. Part of her was curious to see Alexander Reed again, to meet the man behind those intense blue eyes properly. Another part felt intimidated by the world he represented, wealth and privilege so far removed from her daily reality. "I'm not sure. Mr. Reed was quite insistent," James interrupted smoothly. "He says he owes you his life." In the end, curiosity won out. "I'll need his wallet anyway," she conceded. "Excellent. A car will collect you at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, if that suits you." "A car? I can drive myself." Mr. Reed was very specific about sending a car. James's tone brooked no argument. "Until tomorrow, Ms. Harper." The following afternoon, a sleek Bentley delivered her to Reed's historic Beacon Hill brownstone. The neighborhood screamed old money and privilege, with its gas lamps and cobblestone streets. Zoe felt distinctly out of place in her simple sundress and cardigan, clutching Alexander Reed's wallet like a shield. She was escorted through a magnificent foyer with soaring ceilings, and artwork that probably cost more than her yearly salary, then through French doors onto a private terrace overlooking a meticulously landscaped garden. Alexander Reed was waiting there, rising carefully from a comfortable chair as she approached. He moved with deliberate caution, obviously mindful of bandaged ribs, but still exuding a commanding presence. His eyes, those same intense blue eyes she'd seen on the rainy highway, locked onto her immediately. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice deep and smooth, exactly as she'd imagined it would be. "I've been hoping you would come." Up close, he was even more handsome than she remembered, despite the healing gash on his forehead and the pallor of recent injury. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and a strong jaw that spoke of determination. He was dressed casually in comparison to their surroundings, expensive jeans, and a simple button-down shirt that somehow looked more sophisticated than formal attire would have on most men. "Mr. Reed," she replied, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm glad to see you're recovering. Alexander, please." "Or Alex," he gestured to a chair across from his own. "Would you join me for lunch? It's the least I can do." "I have your wallet," she said, holding it out. "That's really why I came." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment perhaps, before he took the wallet with a grateful nod. "Thank you, though I would have happily purchased a new one in exchange for having the opportunity to thank the woman who saved my life." Zoe sat reluctantly, hyper-aware of the elegant table setting between them, the crystal glasses catching the sunlight. A server appeared silently, filling their glasses with water and disappearing just as quietly. "I was just doing what anyone would do," she said, uncomfortable with his gratitude. "No," Alex said firmly. "Not anyone would have stopped on that road in those conditions. Not anyone would have risked their life to pull a stranger from a burning car. You're extraordinary, Ms. Harper, and I won't pretend otherwise." She felt heat rising to her cheeks and busied herself with her water glass. Zoe, please." "And I'm a nurse. It's what I'm trained to do." "A nurse," he repeated, studying her with interest. "Where do you work?" "Boston Memorial Trauma Center." "Ah," he nodded as if this explained everything. "That makes sense now. Your efficiency, your calmness under pressure." Over lunch, a delicious but intimidating array of dishes prepared by his personal chef, Alex explained he'd been returning from his New Hampshire cabin after contemplating a difficult business decision. His company was preparing to launch a new neurostimulator for chronic pain management, but clinical trials had revealed troubling side effects. The board of directors wanted to proceed with the launch anyway. "They've invested too much to pull back now," he explained, his expression darkening. "Over $200 million in development costs, plus they've already started the marketing campaign. I disagree with that approach. Patient safety has to come first." "It does," Zoe agreed, thinking of the patients she'd cared for, the lives in her hands every shift. "Always. Not always in business, unfortunately." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry, I didn't invite you here to burden you with corporate politics." "It's interesting," she said sincerely. "Your company makes medical devices. I use medical devices. We're not in entirely different worlds." His smile transformed his face, erasing the tension that had settled there when discussing his company. "I like that perspective. Would you like a tour of the house? It has quite a history. The brownstone was stunning. 5 stories of architectural beauty and historical significance, filled with art and antiques that Zoe was afraid to stand too close to. Yet despite its grandeur, there was something impersonal about it, as if it were a museum rather than a home. No family photos, no personal mementos cluttered the immaculate surfaces. That changed when they reached his study. Here, finally, were signs of the man himself, books well worn from reading, a desk cluttered with papers and sketches of designs, a guitar in the corner that he admitted to playing very badly but with enthusiasm. And on the wall, a photograph of a smiling older couple standing in front of a modest house, the man's arm around the woman's shoulders. "My parents," Alex explained, his voice softening as he noticed her interest. "They died in a car accident when I was in college. Reed Innovation started with their life insurance money and a design my father never got to patent, a more efficient infusion pump for chemotherapy drugs. He was an engineer. My mother was an oncologist. They met at Massachusetts General. Zoe studied the photograph, seeing echoes of Alex in his father's features, the same intensity in his mother's eyes. They look like wonderful people. They were, he said simply. Everything I've built has been to honor their memory, their values, which is why this neurostimulator situation is so difficult. They would never compromise on safety, not for any amount of money. They ended up talking for hours, the afternoon slipping away unnoticed. Zoe found herself sharing stories from the trauma center, the triumphs and heartbreaks of her profession. Alex listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was truly engaged. As she was leaving, Alex took her hand. "I'd like to properly thank you for what you did, Zoe." "There must be something I can do," Zoe shook her head. "That's not necessary." "Really? Then at least let me take you to dinner." His eyes held hers, surprisingly vulnerable for a man of his position and power. No agenda, no gratitude, just dinner. "I've enjoyed talking with you today." She hesitated, aware of the vast differences in their lives, the complications that could arise. But there was something about Alexander Reed that intrigued her, something beyond his wealth and status, something in those blue eyes that had recognized her in the rain. "I'd like that," she said finally. The smile that lit his face was worth the momentary uncertainty. "Excellent. I'll call you tomorrow to arrange it." As the Bentley drove her home, Zoe realized she was smiling too. Chapter 3, Worlds Apart. Their dinner was a picnic by the Charles River rather than at an upscale restaurant. Alex's attempt at normalcy away from the spotlight that typically followed him. He arrived to pick her up in a modest Audi rather than the Bentley, dressed in jeans and a casual shirt, a wicker basket in hand. "I hope you don't mind," he said, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I thought this might be more comfortable than a formal restaurant." "Less scrutiny." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. "It's perfect," she assured him. "I'm much more a picnic person than a five-star restaurant person anyway." They found a quiet spot beneath a willow tree, spreading a blanket on the grass. As sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, they shared a feast of artisanal cheeses, fresh bread, ripe fruits, and wine that probably cost more than Zoe's monthly rent. More importantly, they shared their stories. Alex spoke of growing up with privilege, but also with parents who insisted he work summer jobs and volunteer in his mother's hospital. He told her about losing them both at 21, the grief and responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders overnight, and how building Reed Innovations had been both a tribute to them and a way to channel his loss into something meaningful. "Enough about me," he said eventually. "Tell me about you. How did you become a nurse?" Zoe hesitated, then told him about growing up in foster care after her mother's overdose when she was 8, about the kind school nurse who had been the only consistent adult in her young life, showing up at parent-teacher conferences and graduation when no one else did, about working 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school, determined to be for others what that school nurse had been for her. "You've overcome more obstacles by 30 than most people face in a lifetime," he said, looking at her with undisguised admiration. "That explains a lot about you." "What does it explain?" she asked, curious. "Your strength, your compassion, the way you ran toward danger rather than away from it." His eyes held hers. "You're remarkable, Zoe Harper." She looked away, uncomfortable with his praise. "I'm just doing what I can with what I have." "Same as anyone." "Not the same as anyone," he insisted gently. "Not even close." A week later, Alex invited her to a fundraising gala for Boston Memorial's new pediatric wing. Despite her anxiety about entering his world, a world of designer gowns and diamond jewelry, of people who spoke of million-dollar donations as casually as she might discuss her grocery lists, Zoe accepted. She spent an absurd amount of her savings on a simple but elegant blue dress that the saleswoman assured her brought out her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened her mother's pendant around her neck, the only piece of jewelry she owned that might be worthy of such an event. When Alex arrived to collect her, his appreciation was evident in his eyes. "You look stunning," he said, his voice lower than usual. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she returned, trying for lightness despite the butterflies in her stomach. In his perfectly tailored tuxedo, he looked every inch the powerful CEO, a far cry from the injured man she'd pulled from a wrecked car, or even the casual companion of their riverside picnic. The gala was exactly as intimidating as she'd feared, a glittering assemblage of Boston's elite, all seemingly acquainted with one another, all curious about the unknown woman on Alexander Reed's arm. Throughout the evening, Alex remained attentive, introducing her to colleagues with genuine pride, never leaving her side. "Everyone's staring," she murmured as they moved onto the dance floor. "Let them," he replied simply, drawing her closer. "I don't care what they think." "Easy for you to say. You're used to this world." His expression softened. "This isn't my world either, not really. It's just a role I play for the company. My world is in my workshop, tinkering with designs until 3 a.m, or at my cabin, playing my guitar badly where no one can hear." She smiled at that, relaxing slightly in his arms as they swayed to the music. "I can't imagine you tinkering." "I'll show you sometime," he promised. "My workshop is my favorite place in the world." Their moment was interrupted by a stunning blonde woman who approached them, eyes flashing with barely contained fury. She wore a red gown that clung to every perfect curve, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. "Alexander," she said coldly. "So, the rumors are true. You've replaced me already." Alex's arm tightened around Zoe's waist. "Victoria, you're making a scene," he said quietly. "Oh, I'm making a scene? You disappear for weeks, cancel the product launch we've spent millions on, and now you show up with your latest charity case." Victoria's gaze swept over Zoe dismissively. "What is she, a waitress?" "Your physical therapist." "This is Zoe Harper," Alex said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She's a trauma nurse at Boston Memorial, and you will treat her with respect." Victoria's perfect eyebrows rose. "A nurse? How noble." She turned her attention back to Alex. "The board meeting is on Monday. You might want to prepare yourself for a vote of no confidence." "Is that a threat, Victoria?" "A courtesy, darling. Just so you're not blindsided." Her smile was razor sharp. "Does she know who you really are, Alex? What you're capable of? Or have you been playing the wounded hero to win her sympathy?" With that parting shot, she glided away, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. "I'm sorry about that," Alex said, his jaw tight. "Victoria Sinclair, she's the head of marketing and a board member. We were involved briefly about a year ago. It ended badly." "I gathered that," Zoe said, fighting the urge to flee the ballroom. "What did she mean about a vote of no confidence?" "Politics," he said dismissively. "Nothing for you to worry about." But the moment was ruined. For the rest of the evening, Zoe was acutely aware of the whispers and stares, the speculation about her relationship with Alexander Reed. Even worse was the seed of doubt Victoria had planted. Does she know who you really are? The truth was, she didn't know, and that was the problem. In the car home, Zoe stared out the window, mind racing. What was she doing? Alex lived in a world of wealth, power, and corporate battles, a world far removed from her own, a world with vindictive exes in designer gowns and board meetings that could destroy careers. Was she just a distraction for him? A novelty? "You're very quiet," Alex said, reaching for her hand. She let him take it, but her response was guarded. "It's been an overwhelming evening." "I understand." He squeezed her hand gently. Victoria was out of line. "I should have anticipated she would be there." "It's not just her," Zoe admitted. "It's everything. Your world is so different from mine, Alex. I'm not sure I belong in it." He turned to face her, his expression earnest. "Then we'll find a way to bridge our worlds. Or build a new one. This is new for me too, Zoe. But I know what I feel when I'm with you, and it's worth navigating a few complications." Before she could respond, they had arrived at her apartment building. Frank, Alex's driver, opened the door for her. "If I may, Ms. Harper," Frank said kindly as he helped her out. "Mr. Reed has changed since the accident. For the better. I've never seen him like this." The unexpected comment surprised her. "Thank you, Frank," she said, uncertain how to respond. Alex walked her to her door, the tension between them palpable. "Will I see you again?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. "I need some time to think," she said honestly. "This is all happening very fast." He nodded, accepting her answer without pushing. "I understand. Take all the time you need." But as she entered her apartment alone, Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Does she know who you really are? The truth was she didn't know, and that was the problem. Chapter 4, Trust and Truth. 3 days passed without communication between them. Zoe threw herself into her work at the hospital, taking extra shifts to keep her mind occupied. But thoughts of Alex intruded constantly. His smile, his intensity, the way he looked at her as if she were something precious and rare. And underneath it all, the nagging doubt. Was she being naive? Was she just another conquest for a man accustomed to getting what he wanted?
Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to our story.
On the third evening, as she was leaving the hospital after a grueling 12-hour shift, she found James waiting beside a now familiar Bentley. "Miss Harper," he greeted her with a small bow. "I hope I'm not intruding." "James," she acknowledged, too tired to be properly surprised. "What can I do for you? Mr. Reed asked me to deliver this." He handed her a sealed envelope, thick and expensive to the touch. He emphasized that whether you choose to open it is entirely your decision, with no obligation whatsoever. "That sounds ominous," she said, turning the envelope over in her hands. James's professional demeanor softened slightly. "If I may speak frankly, Ms. Harper, I've worked for Mr. Reed for 8 years. I've never seen him as invested in anyone as he is in you." The comment echoed Frank's from the other night. "Thank you for the delivery, James," she said, non-committal. When she arrived home, Zoe placed the envelope on her kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. Finally, curiosity won out. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note in a strong, decisive hand. "Zoe, I understand your reservations. The gap between our worlds must seem insurmountable from your perspective. Perhaps it is. But before you decide, I ask one thing: know who I truly am. This drive contains confidential data from our neurostimulator trials, the complete, unredacted results. I'm trusting you with information that could destroy my company if misused. Not because I'm reckless, but because I believe in your integrity and judgment. No pressure, no expectations, just truth." Alex intrigued. Despite herself, Zoe plugged the drive into her laptop. What followed was hours of poring over clinical data, patient reports, and internal memos. The neurostimulator showed promising results for pain relief in 68% of trial participants, a significant advancement for chronic pain sufferers. But a concerning 22% had experienced serious neurological side effects ranging from memory problems to seizures. More troubling was evidence that researchers had downplayed these findings under pressure from certain board members, particularly Victoria Sinclair, whose division had already spent millions marketing the device. Alex had proposed delaying the launch to redesign the device despite the substantial cost, and had commissioned independent analysis of the data, actions that had clearly put him at odds with his board. His handwritten note on one document read simply, "Better to lose money than lives." It was nearly dawn when Zoe finished reading. She sat back, emotions conflicted. The Alex revealed in these documents was principled, ethical, willing to risk his position to do the right thing. But sharing this information with her was also a calculated risk. Was he genuinely trusting her or manipulating her sympathies? Her phone buzzed with a breaking news alert: Reed Innovations. Board votes to remove founder Alexander. Reed as CEO heart-pounding. Zoe clicked on the article. The board had voted to replace Alex with Victoria Sinclair as interim CEO, citing philosophical differences about the company's direction. The neurostimulator launch would proceed as scheduled next month. Without hesitation, Zoe threw some clothes in a bag, grabbed her helmet, and rode her motorcycle to Alex's New Hampshire cabin. She'd never been there, but she remembered him mentioning it was on Lake Winnipesaukee, and a quick internet search gave her the address. It was presumptuous, perhaps even foolish, but something told her that's where he would go. The cabin turned out to be a generous description for what was actually a beautiful lakeside home, rustic but luxurious in its own way. She found Alex on the deck overlooking the water, unshaven and disheveled, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. He looked up as she approached, surprise and something like hope flickering in his bloodshot eyes. "Zoe? How did you find me?" "Educated guess," she said, dropping her bag. "I read the files." Something shifted in his expression, grief giving way to determination. He straightened, suddenly more like the confident CEO she'd met at the gala. And and I think you're doing the right thing, even if it's costing you everything." She took a seat beside him. "Tell me how I can help." For a moment, he just stared at her, as if unable to comprehend her presence or her offer. Then he stood abruptly. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her to a detached garage that had been converted into a workshop, a chaotic space filled with computers, circuit boards, and half-assembled prototypes. This, she realized, was the real heart of Alexander Reed, not the sterile perfection of his Boston brownstone. "This is the original prototype for the neurostimulator," he explained, indicating a device connected to a complex testing apparatus. "I've been working on identifying the flaw." They worked through the night, Alex coding, while Zoe provided insights from her medical background. Her experience with patient reactions to various treatments proved invaluable, offering perspectives the engineers and data scientists hadn't considered. Together, they found a critical error in the algorithm that explained the neurological side effects, a calibration issue that caused the device to occasionally deliver micropulses at dangerous frequencies. "Will it be enough to stop the launch?" Zoe asked, suppressing a yawn as dawn broke over the lake. "It should. This proves the algorithm is fundamentally flawed and dangerous." He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "I'll need to present this to the FDA directly, since I no longer have authority within the company." Zoe nodded, feeling pride mixed with concern. "What will happen to you? To the company? Best case? We delay the launch, I get reinstated, and we fix the device." Alex's shoulders slumped. "Worst case? Victoria convinces the board I've lost my mind, pushes through an unsafe product, and people get hurt. That can't happen," Zoe said firmly, her exhaustion forgotten in a surge of righteous anger. "We won't let it." Alex looked at her, something soft and wondering in his gaze. "We." The word hung between them, loaded with meaning. Zoe had come here intending only to check on him, to make sure he was all right. Somewhere during the night, as they'd worked side by side, her focus had shifted. This wasn't just about Alex anymore. It was about patients who could be harmed, about doing what was right regardless of personal cost. "Yes, she said confidently, meeting his gaze. "Patient safety is my priority too. I didn't spend years becoming a nurse to stand by while a dangerous device goes to market." Alex reached across the workshop table, taking her hand. His palm was warm against hers, his fingers slightly calloused from hours of working with tools and prototypes. Not the manicured hands of a corporate figurehead, but those of an engineer, a creator. "I don't deserve you, Zoe Harper," he said softly. "It's not about deserving," she replied, holding his gaze. "It's about choosing, and I'm choosing to help." Their moment was interrupted by Alex's phone ringing. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting to alert focus. "It's James," he said, answering it immediately. "What's happening?" Zoe watched as Alex's face darkened, his knuckles whitening around the phone. "When?" he demanded. "Are you sure it was her?" Another pause. "No, don't confront her. Act normal. I'm coming back." He ended the call, already moving toward the door with renewed purpose. "Someone broke into my office at the Boston headquarters last night. Files are missing, including backup copies of the trial data. The security cameras were conveniently disabled, but the night guard saw a blonde woman leaving through the executive garage." "Victoria?" Zoe asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Who else?" "She's covering her tracks, destroying evidence before I can get it to the FDA." Alex grabbed his keys from the counter, his movements quick and decisive. "I need to get back to Boston immediately. If I leave now, I can make it before the emergency board meeting she's called for this afternoon." "I'm coming with you," Zoe said, brooking no argument as she picked up her helmet. Alex paused, studying her face as if searching for something. Whatever he saw, there must have satisfied him because he nodded once decisively. "We'll take my car. It's faster than your motorcycle for this distance." They drove in focused silence, both acutely aware of what was at stake. It wasn't just Alex's company hanging in the balance. It was his parents' legacy, his own integrity, and most importantly, the safety of countless patients who would use the device. "Thank you," Alex said after several miles, "for believing in me, for helping me." Zoe looked over at him, noting the tension in his jaw, the tight grip of his hands on the steering wheel. I believe in the evidence, she said honestly, and in doing what's right even when it's difficult. A smile ghosted across his lips. You always say exactly what you mean, don't you? No games, no hidden agendas. Life's too short for games, she replied, and people's lives are at stake. The rest of the journey passed in more comfortable silence, a plan forming between them. By the time they reached Boston, they were ready. Chapter 5. Standing Ground. Reed Innovations headquarters occupied a gleaming glass tower in downtown Boston, its lobby adorned with displays of the company's groundbreaking medical devices and the lives they had changed. As they entered, Zoe noticed how employees reacted to Alex's presence, some with obvious surprise, others with respect, a few with careful neutrality that spoke volumes about the internal politics at play. James met them at the executive elevator, his normally composed demeanor betraying a hint of anxiety. They're assembled in the main boardroom, he reported quietly. Ms. Sinclair has brought legal counsel. Of course she has, Alex muttered. He turned to Zoe. You don't have to do this. This isn't your fight. I'm already here, she replied calmly, and I know what I saw in those files. The boardroom fell silent as they entered. 12 people sat around a massive table, with Victoria Sinclair at the far end, looking far more collected than she had at the gala. In a razor-sharp business suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her expression registered brief surprise at Zoe's presence before smoothing into cool disdain. Alexander, she said coldly, you're trespassing on company property. It's still my company, Alex replied steadily, making no move to sit down. Instead, he remained standing, Zoe beside him, a united front. Not according to the board, Victoria countered, gesturing to the people around the table. The vote was conclusive. The launch is proceeding as planned, and you are no longer in a position to interfere. Not if the FDA has anything to say about it. Alex placed his laptop on the table and opened it. We found the flaw in the algorithm. The device is fundamentally unsafe in its current configuration. If it goes to market as is, people will be injured, possibly permanently. Victoria's confidence faltered almost imperceptibly, but Zoe caught it, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a momentary tension in her shoulders. Even if that's true, Victoria recovered smoothly, the FDA review would take months. By then, we'll have sold thousands of units. The revenue projections... Not if I call an emergency press conference right now, Alex said quietly. Imagine the headlines, Reed Innovations knowingly launches dangerous medical device. How would that affect your revenue projections, Victoria? One of the suited men, presumably one of the lawyers, leaned over to whisper in Victoria's ear. The other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Zoe noted that several looked distinctly uneasy, as if they hadn't been fully informed about the risks. Perhaps we should look at this new information before making any decisions, suggested an older man at the table. Dr. Chen is right, Alex said, addressing the board directly. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Look at the evidence yourselves. If you still believe the device is safe after reviewing our findings, I'll respect your decision. The lawyers conferred quietly. Ms. Sinclair, if there's validity to these concerns, the company's liability would be extensive. We would strongly advise a thorough review before proceeding. Victoria's composure cracked, genuine anger flashing in her eyes. This is a delay tactic, nothing more. He's trying to sabotage the launch because he can't accept that the board has moved on without him. No, Zoe spoke up, her voice calm but carrying. It's about patient safety. I've reviewed the clinical data myself. The device causes seizures in a significant percentage of users. As a healthcare professional, I can tell you that no hospital would use this technology if those risks were fully disclosed. Victoria glared at her with undisguised contempt. And who exactly are you to make that assessment? A nurse? Playing scientist after a few nights with Alexander? The room fell uncomfortably silent at the cutting remark. Zoe felt heat rise to her cheeks but kept her voice steady. I'm someone who has to look patients in the eye every day, someone who took an oath to do no harm. Can you say the same, Ms. Sinclair? Victoria turned her attention back to Alex, her expression hardening. You would destroy your own company? Your parents' legacy? Everything you've built? My parents were doctors and engineers who wanted to help people, Alex replied, his voice quiet but firm. They would never put profits above safety, and neither will I. If protecting the Reed Innovations name means tearing down what it's become under your influence, then yes, I'll do exactly that. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, calculation in her eyes. Then she glared at Zoe. You did this. He was manageable before you came along. Zoe met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. He was never yours to manage. Victoria gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements and stalked toward the door. This isn't over, Alexander, she warned. Not by a long shot. After she left, the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The remaining board members looked to Alex expectantly. I think we have some work to do, he said simply. What followed was 3 hours of detailed technical presentations, with Alex and Zoe walking the board through their findings, explaining the flaw in the algorithm and demonstrating why it resulted in dangerous side effects. Dr. Chen, who Zoe learned was a respected neurologist and early investor in the company, asked particularly incisive questions. The solution is actually fairly straightforward, Alex concluded. We need to recalibrate the frequency response and add a safety protocol that shuts down the device if it detects abnormal neural activity. The hardware is sound, it's the software that needs revision. How long would these modifications take? Asked one of the board members. 3 months for development and testing, another 3 for FDA approval of the revisions. We'd still be first to market with this technology. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. It seems the responsible course of action is clear. I move that we delay the launch pending these modifications and that we reinstate Alexander Reed as CEO to oversee the process. The vote was unanimous. By evening, a press release had been drafted announcing the company's decision to enhance safety features on the neurostimulator before launch, positioning it as a proactive measure rather than an admission of a problem. Victoria had been placed on administrative leave while an investigation proceeded into her handling of the clinical data. After the press conference, Alex collapsed into his office chair, exhausted but triumphant. The past 48 hours, from his ouster to his reinstatement, had taken an obvious toll, but there was relief in his eyes and something that looked like peace. We did it, he said, looking up at Zoe. We actually did it. She perched on the edge of his desk, smiling. You did it. This was your battle. One I couldn't have won without you. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. You gave me something to fight for beyond the company. You reminded me what matters. The intensity in his gaze made her heart race. Alex, she began uncertainly, I'm not sure where I fit in your world. All of this, she gestured to the opulent office, the stunning view of Boston's skyline, the trappings of corporate power. It's so far from my reality. Maybe that's the problem, he said, standing so they were face to face, their hands still joined. I've been thinking of it as my world and your world when really... What? She prompted when he paused. When really I just want us to build something new. Together. He took both her hands in his blue eyes earnest and vulnerable, in a way she hadn't seen before. When you pulled me from that car, you saved more than my life, Zoe. You saved me from becoming someone I didn't want to be, someone who compromises, who looks the other way, who chooses the easy path over the right one. I'm just a nurse, Zoe whispered, overwhelmed by the emotion in his voice, in his eyes. You're the strongest, most genuine person I've ever known, Alex said, touching her cheek with gentle fingers. And I'm falling in love with you. I know it's too soon to say that. I know it's complicated, but it's true. Zoe felt tears pricking at her eyes. After years of guarding her heart, of keeping people at a safe distance, she'd somehow allowed this man, this brilliant, principled, complicated man, past her defenses. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she admitted softly. And you're right, it's terrifying. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Then it deepened with an urgency that spoke of relief and longing and possibility. When they finally drew apart, breathless and smiling, Zoe knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges their different worlds might present, they would face it together. Chapter 6, New Beginnings. The headlines the next morning were predictably sensational. Reed back in control. Tech billionaire halts product launch, citing safety concerns. Who is the Mystery Woman by Reed's Side? Sources say she's a nurse who saved his life. Corporate drama at Reed Innovations, marketing chief. Suspended amid safety concerns, Zoe scrolled through the articles on her laptop, cringing at the speculation about her relationship with Alex. Some reporters had dug into her background, mentioning her work at Boston Memorial and even her childhood in foster care. One particularly awful gossip site suggested she was a gold digger who had engineered her rescue of Boston's most eligible bachelor. "I told you we should have stayed at the cabin another day," Alex said, reading over her shoulder in her apartment kitchen. He'd arrived with breakfast and coffee, looking surprisingly refreshed despite everything they'd been through. "Is it always like this?" Zoe asked, closing the laptop with a grimace. "The media attention?" "Unfortunately, yes." He hesitated, studying her face. "If it's too much..." Zoe reached for his hand across the small table. "I didn't say that. I just need to adjust. It's not exactly what I expected when I stopped to help at an accident." He laughed softly. "Not exactly what I expected either when I drove too fast on a rainy night." Their relationship deepened despite the challenges. Zoe continued working at the hospital, refusing Alex's suggestion that she take a leave of absence. "I'm a nurse," she told him firmly, "and that doesn't change because of us. I need my work, my identity separate from you and all of this." She gestured vaguely to encompass the media attention, the wealth, the sudden entry into Boston's elite circles. Alex respected her decision, though he couldn't help worrying about the paparazzi that occasionally followed her now. He installed better security in her apartment building, with her reluctant permission, and made sure she always had a car available if she wanted it, though she often still preferred her motorcycle. Meanwhile, Alex threw himself into redesigning the neurostimulator, assembling a team of engineers and doctors, including Zoe, whose practical experience proved invaluable. She joined meetings when her schedule allowed, offering insights into patient experience and recovery that the technicians and scientists would otherwise have missed. "The patients need to be able to adjust the settings themselves within safe parameters," she insisted during one development meeting. "Pain isn't static. It changes with activity, weather, stress, and hospital visits are expensive and time-consuming." The engineers incorporated her suggestions, creating a patient-controlled interface with built-in safety limits. When the prototype was ready, Alex insisted on crediting her contributions. "Move in with me," Alex asked one evening, as they walked along the Charles River, retracing the path where they'd had their first real date. The autumn leaves had turned, painting the landscape in golds and reds. The request caught her off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. They'd been spending most nights together anyway, either at her apartment or his brownstone. "In your mansion?" she asked, her tone light but her question serious. Alex considered this, seeming to understand the real question beneath her words. "Actually, what if we found something new? Something that's ours, not mine or yours. A fresh start." 2 months later, they moved into a renovated loft in a former textile factory, spacious but warm, with exposed brick walls and large windows overlooking the city. They furnished it together, blending his appreciation for clean lines and fine craftsmanship with her preference for comfort and practicality. He built bookshelves for her nursing textbooks and novels. She created a space for his guitar and engineering sketches. It became a home that belonged to neither of their previous worlds, but rather to the new one they were creating together. The revised neurostimulator launched 6 months later to critical acclaim. Early patients reported significant pain reduction with none of the neurological side effects that had plagued the original design. The media praised Reed Innovations for prioritizing safety over profits, and the company's stock soared to record highs. Victoria Sinclair resigned rather than face termination, taking a position with a competitor where her aggressive approach might be more welcome. 1 year to the day after the accident, Alex took Zoe back to the spot on the highway where their lives had collided. A small memorial stone had been placed there, his idea, but unknown to her until now. It bore a simple inscription: "Second chances begin here." "Why here?" she asked as they stood beside it, the setting sun gilding the autumn landscape. "Because this is where my life began again," he said softly, taking her hands in his. The man before her, now was different from the wounded CEO she'd pulled from a wreck, different even from the determined fighter who'd reclaimed his company. This Alex was softer around the edges, more at peace with himself and his place in the world. "Zoe Harper," he continued, his voice rich with emotion, "you saved me in every way a person can be saved. Not just from the fire, but from myself, from becoming someone I wouldn't recognize." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Will you marry me?" The ring he offered was simple and elegant, not the ostentatious diamond she'd feared, but a band of white gold set with small sapphires that matched his eyes and caught the light like stars. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding was a compromise, neither the lavish society event Alex's position might have demanded, nor the simple ceremony Zoe initially suggested. Instead, they gathered in a historic botanical garden with flowers in full bloom and the setting sun painting the sky gold. Their guests represented both their worlds. Alex's business colleagues and investors mingled with Zoe's fellow nurses and the foster siblings she'd remained close to over the years. At the reception, Alex announced the launch of the Harper Reed Foundation, dedicated to providing medical technology to underserved communities. Her dream expanded beyond what she'd ever imagined. The foundation would focus initially on rural hospitals and clinics, providing equipment and training that might otherwise be financially out of reach. "This is your vision," he told her privately after the announcement, as guests applauded. "I'm just providing the resources. You'll shape what it becomes." As they danced under a canopy of lights, Zoe rested her head against his shoulder. "I never expected any of this," she whispered. "When I stopped that night, I was just doing my job." "Neither did I," Alex admitted, holding her close. "But now I can't imagine any other path. It's as if everything in my life was leading to that moment, that road, that storm." "You're getting philosophical in your old age," she teased. "Marriage will do that to a man," he replied with a grin. 18 months after their wedding, on another rainy night, Zoe shook Alex awake at 3 a.m. "My water broke," she said calmly, though her eyes betrayed her nervousness. Despite all his wealth and power, Alex looked utterly terrified. His usual confidence vanished, replaced by panic and a touching helplessness. "Now? But you're not due for 2 more weeks. Tell that to your daughter," Zoe replied, wincing through a contraction. "She's definitely coming now." What followed was a blur of activity, the drive to the hospital, the hours of labor, Zoe's determined focus, and occasional colorful language when the pain peaked. Alex remained by her side throughout, alternating between helpless anxiety and fierce encouragement. For all his accomplishments, all his resources, he could do nothing but support her through this most primal of experiences. 12 hours later, they welcomed Emma Harper Reed into the world, 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfection, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same startling blue as her father's. As Alex held his daughter for the first time, Zoe saw in his face the same mix of awe and terror she felt herself. "She's so small," he whispered, cradling the newborn with almost comical care. "But strong," Zoe said, exhausted but radiant. "Like her father." "Like her mother," Alex corrected, gazing at Zoe with undisguised adoration. "The strongest person I know." As Emma grew, so did their understanding of what truly mattered. Alex stepped back from day-to-day operations at Reed Innovations, remaining as chairman of the board, but delegating many of his previous responsibilities. He spent mornings in his home workshop developing new ideas, and afternoons with Emma, determined that she would know both her parents despite their demanding careers. Zoe reduced her hospital hours, but continued practicing nursing part-time. The Harper Reed Foundation flourished under her guidance, expanding from equipment donations to training programs and eventually full scholarships for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds to enter healthcare professions. On Emma's 3rd birthday, they held a small party in the garden of their home, a Victorian townhouse they'd purchased and renovated in a neighborhood halfway between the hospital and Reed Innovations headquarters. As they watched their daughter blow out candles on a lopsided cake they'd made together, Alex had insisted on doing it themselves rather than ordering from a bakery. He slipped his arm around Zoe's waist. "Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting?" he asked quietly. If you'd taken a different route home that night, if I'd left the cabin an hour earlier or later. Zoe leaned into him, remembering the rain, the flames, the desperate moments that had changed everything. Sometimes, but mostly I think about how lucky we are that we crashed into each other when we needed it most. Alex kissed her temple softly. Not luck, he murmured. Destiny. Zoe smiled, watching their daughter laugh with unrestrained joy as she opened presents with her little friends. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps some collisions were meant to happen, some hearts destined to find each other among all the chaos and confusion of life. She had saved him from the flames that night, not knowing who he was. He had saved her too, in ways she hadn't known she needed, from loneliness, from the walls she'd built around her heart, from a life defined solely by her work. And together, they had built something neither could have created alone, a bridge between two worlds, a family, a love story that began with a crash and continued with a choice every single day to choose each other again and again. Destiny, she agreed, turning to kiss him properly, or the best accident that ever happened to us.